This is the story of a brave and talented man, William Roy Pannell, who gave his life for his country in World War II at the age of 22. He is the uncle of my wife, Martha Randolph Brown, and a beloved member of the Pannell family that I have admired and loved for the past 53 years. Details of his story have not been clear until recently, when records from family members and narratives of military campaigns have become more available on the internet. I am especially appreciative of the records that Johnny Rakestraw provided, as well as information from the American World War II cemetery in Belgium. Roy was a son of Walter and Katrina Pannell of Blue Springs, Mississippi. He enlisted in the Army and was assigned to the 109th Infantry Regiment of the 28th Division. The 28th Division was also known as the Keystone Division. Roy had one younger brother, Jerry, and 6 sisters shown in this photo with his parents. He was loved dearly. Roy was a talented young man and very handsome. He was a very good mechanic, and as the sketches show here, he was a talented artist. This is Roy's enlistment card. He was a slim, 130-pound young man. He was assigned to the European Theater of Operations. He would be headed for Normandy and beyond. This is Roy's Social Security card. Before being drafted, he was a sheet metal worker in Connecticut. Roy sailed to Lower Wales of the United Kingdom and arrived October the 8th, 1943. He began training for the European invasion that would be coming. After about 9 months of training, he went to Tidwell, England on July the 18th, 1944, with the 28th Division, and was ready to sail to Normandy. Roy landed at Omaha Beach, July the 22nd, about 7 weeks after D-Day. This map shows his path from Normandy across France to Belgium and Germany. Roy's journey will end in a very brutal battle in the Hurtgen Forest, which began on November the 2nd, 1944. This presentation will break the journey into several segments as we continue across France to Germany. The 28th went right into battle and was almost immediately involved in Operation Cobra, which was decisive in securing an Allied victory in the Normandy campaign to push the Germans eastward. Towards the end of August, they were fighting in the Battle of the Hedgerows. The Battle of the Hedgerows was very brutal. It wasn't just a bunch of shrubbery that might be in your yard. In these French towns in late August, the 28th Division trapped the remnants of the German 7th Army and then headed to Paris. Paris was liberated in late August, and on August 29th, the 28th Division marched in parade as General Charles de Gaulle, General Bradley, and other generals watched. Roy was in the parade. General Eisenhower later wreathed and gave a speech. The crowds were ecstatic and thankful to be liberated. The 28th marched with bayonets because they were headed towards another battle. In the next video, you will see details of the parade. was no time for rest, however, and the advance continued on through the forests of Compiègne, La Ferrière, Saint-Quentin, Lyon, Rethel, Sedan, and on the 6th of September, the crossing of the Meuse was accomplished. On about September the 8th, the city of Orléans, Belgium, fell. On September the 11th, a reinforced company of the 109th Infantry, which was Roy's regiment, crossed the Our River on a bridge between Wasamac in the northern tip of Luxembourg and the German village of Savigny. This was the first invasion of German soil. Roy would have been proud. This is a photo of the Our River on the border of Belgium and Germany. In September, the division moved north towards the Siegfried Line, clearing the Monschau forest of German forces. After a brief respite, the Keystone soldiers entered the Hürtgen forest in late September. Attacks in the forest began November the 2nd, 1944. The Battle of Hürtgen Forest turned out to be the longest battle in World War II. There, the attack began November the 2nd, 1944, and the 28th Division stormed into Wassenack, Kammerscheid, and Schmidt amid savage fighting. Losses were heavy, and ground once wrested from the enemy was lost and regained to be lost again to the ever-increasing fury of the counterattacks. The next slides are going to show various details of the Battle of Hürtgen Forest, paying attention to where the 109th Regiment was. This is Roy's division. Notice they start out here at the top. You see the German army coming in there in gray. On the 8th of November, the 109th Division moved over a little bit to the right in these places. On the 9th, they were here, and on the 10th, they were moved even closer, and you see the German army surrounding them. They were under intense fire. On the 11th, they were about in the same place. And on the 12th, Roy was wounded and taken to the hospital. This is a video describing the Battle of the Hürtgen Forest, and shows what a terrible, terrible battle this was.
A tranquil forest in the Eifel region of Western Germany. A forest that harbors a dark past, with a legacy still visible in isolated places. From a time when it was dubbed a green hell. In the closing stages of the Second World War, it was the scene of bloody fighting between US and German forces. The path to the Western Allies' advance from Belgium into Germany led straight through the forest around the village of Hürtgen. For around 5 months, the forest was the scene of successive, bitterly fought battles between the American and German armies. Although the Americans had more troops and were better equipped, their attempt to drive the Germans out of the forest was a military disaster. Progress was slow and costly as they became bogged down in the treacherous terrain.
It was a nightmare. I don't think there can be a worse hell. It was awful. It was freezing, and these damn shells, they hit the top of the tree and came down in thousands of fragments that could kill anybody.
An estimated 25,000 American and German soldiers died in the forest.
To survive the Hurtgen forest was a miracle. But here I am. I don't know how I survived.
The forest was a death trap for the U.S. troops. They called it Hurtgen Forest after the small village that was at the heart of the fighting. In mid-November, author Ernest Hemingway was witness to the bloody battles there. In his later novel, Across the River and Into the Trees, based on his experiences, he wrote, "It was a place where it was extremely difficult for a man to stay alive, even if all he did was be there."
During the day, General Koto, in command of the 28th Infantry Division, had a meeting with the 5th Corps and 1st Army commanders in which he suggested that his troops be withdrawn across the Karl Stream. Both the Corps and Army commanders agreed. It was the beginning of the end. While the 1055th Infantry Regiment had successfully captured Kommerscheid, the men of the 156th and 60th Panzer Grenadier Regiments had to give up the eastern part of Osnabrück to the American engineers. At the same time, however, the Germans were able to infiltrate the lines along the Karl Trail. On the next day, November 8th, the 3rd Battalion of the 109th Infantry Regiment was called out again to proceed to the Karl River, from where they were to act as the basis of the withdrawal across the stream. They eventually arrived at the Karl Trail at 1 p.m. L Company stayed behind between Simonskal and the bridge at the Mestrenger Mühle in order to provide flank protection. In the meantime, contact was established with Colonel Nelson and eventually with Colonel Ripple as well. The commanders on the field quickly made plans for a smooth withdrawal across the Karl Stream. That 9th of November, Major Berndt, the surgeon of the 112th Infantry Regiment, asked his superiors if he could set up a truce to bring in the wounded still left on the battlefield. His suggestion was declined, and the response he got was that he should instead find out what the Germans thought of such a truce. Major Berndt then moved up to the aid station at the Karl Trail to see the situation for himself. Unaware that the division had by then authorized a truce, Berndt and his interpreter went out to the bridge on their own to seek the German commander in the area. Eventually a lieutenant came out to meet them. Berndt was surprised to hear that all the wounded along the wood line at Kommerscheid had already been taken away, but there was still the situation at the aid station, which was piled with wounded men awaiting evacuation. The German officer agreed that his men would let the evacuation vehicles pass, but he couldn't vouch for the German artillery. Both Americans and Germans worked together in order to evacuate the wounded. Later, problems arose on the Karl Trail closer to Vossenack when the German captain was unaware of the truce. The German officer insisted that only the seriously injured soldiers and the medical personnel could be evacuated. Slowly but surely the wounded were evacuated under the close watch of the German captain and his men. By that time, the German 89th Infantry Division had relieved almost the entirety of the 116th Panzer Division, which was shifted to Hürtgen for a new German attack on the salient, held by the 12th Infantry Regiment of the 4th Infantry Division. On the 10th of November, unaware of the new German peril at Hürtgen, the Americans attacked to even their lines. The 1st Battalion of the 109th had to take over from the 112th Infantry Regiment, since the latter consisted nearly entirely of fresh recruits. The 109th partially reached their objectives. On the 11th of November a new truce was established, this time by a German medical officer who wanted to collect the German dead in the Karl Gorge. The Americans were given time to find a new route, avoiding the German captain to the north. Eventually the entire US aid station was evacuated. The next day the 110th Infantry Regiment made yet another attempt to capture the Raffelsbrand pillboxes, but the companies were so worn down that the attack never really materialized. All elements of the 112th Infantry Regiment were finally relieved after the 2nd Ranger Battalion was attached to the 109th Infantry Regiment on the 14th of November.
Since the Americans did not want their soldiers buried in Germany, the former enemy, many were laid to rest in the Netherlands, Luxembourg, or Belgium, at the military cemetery of Henri-Chapelle, for example.
On December 9th, Roy's parents received this telegram, which says, "The Secretary of War asks that I assure you of his deep sympathy in the loss of your son, Private First Class William R. Pannell. Report states that he died 20th of November in Germany as a result of wounds received in battle." Signed by Dunlop, the acting adjutant general. Also, Opal, one of Roy's sisters, sent a telegram to her mother saying, "Dearest mother, please be brave and try to believe Roy is happier in his new home. There isn't much we can do except trust in the one who knows best. My grief is great and I pray for you constantly. My plans to come home have failed so far. Hope Daddy gets there soon. Will write letter tomorrow. Lots of love, from Opal." A lot has been said in retrospect of the way the Battle of Hurtgen Forest was planned by the generals. It is generally concluded that a lot more lives were lost than would have been if a better strategy had been followed. Major General Norman Daniel Dutch Coda Sr. was a general over the 28th Division. He was great at Normandy, but was considered a failure in the Hurtgen Forest. All told, 120,000 soldiers sustained 33,000 casualties in what the historian Carlo d'Este would call the most ineptly fought series of battles of the war in the West. General Eisenhower himself paid a visit to the area to review plans going forward. The Battle of the Bulge ensued in the next few weeks. That was a big turning point in completing the defeat of Germany. This is a memorial to the 28th Division that had liberated Champagne, France. This is the Henri-Chapelle American Cemetery and Memorial in Belgium. This is where Roy is buried. This is Roy's marker in the cemetery. We will always be grateful for his service and his sacrifice. We love him so much. He will always be remembered.